All right, well, good evening. It's 7 o'clock. Welcome to the Riverdale TOD Open House. This is a virtual open house to discuss the development near the Riverdale Station, which is the area Northdale behind the Target and Riverdale Commons. My name is Grant Fernelius. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Coon Rapids. I'm joined this evening by Matt Brown, my colleague, who is the Economic Development Coordinator for the city, and Trevor Martinez, who is with Sherman and Associates, which is the developer of the project. Tonight's format is a Zoom webinar, so that's a virtual platform, obviously. The event will be recorded and will be posted on our website in the near future. In terms of the agenda, we have a short presentation by Trevor as far as phase 3 and 4 of the development. He'll talk a little bit about that. We will answer questions in the chat feature. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see there's a chat icon. So if you want to type in a question there, you can certainly do that. You can either address that to everyone, or you can address it to myself or Matt, and we can try and answer it. Ideally, it would be great if you could ask a question that everyone could see. If something's a little more complicated, what we might do is save that for the end and then address it verbally if it's something that has a nuance or some context, and it's maybe a little more complicated answer, but that's how we'll choose to address that. We will be monitoring those questions. So again, if you want to ask those, please feel free to do so. And we'll certainly leave time at the end to address those questions that may come up towards the end of the presentation. We will also provide our contact information at the end. So if you have questions that you think about after this or want to contact us at a later date, you can certainly do that. So with that, I will turn it over to Trevor Martinez. He will share his screen. He has a short PowerPoint presentation to talk about the next phase of the development. So Trevor, welcome and good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Grant, for having us, and we are excited to share our plans for the next stage of this opportunity. So as Grant mentioned, this is for, I apologize. This is for the next stage of the Riverdale Station redevelopment at the 3100 block of Northdale Boulevard, that is north of the North Star Station and south of behind the Target. The site, as you can see, currently has two developments or two buildings at it, Lyra Apartments and Nova. We're going to go and get into those in 1 second. This is a site that's part of a larger redevelopment effort that has been a larger part of the development that Matt or Grant has a longer history with than I, but Sherman has been interested and involved with the master redevelopment of this site since probably 2015 or 2016. And over time, our vision has matured and refined into the plan that we're going to present today, which is the final two phases of the project. Here, what you'd see is a view looking from the south northward towards the Target. The two existing buildings at the bottom are Lyra and Nova, which are there today, and phase 3 and phase 4 are what we're here to talk about. With a brief recap of phase 1, Lyra, which was completed a little over a year ago now, has 180 market rate units, and along with 120 underground parking stalls and 60 surface stalls on the site. It is currently 88% leased, and we're hoping that here in the next couple of months, it will finish its lease-up period and enter into stabilization. The second phase is an affordable project, an income-restricted project that's called Nova. It has 71 affordable units. It has 68 underground parking spaces, along with 32 surface stalls, and has been 100% leased, almost essentially since the first day that the project was opened. What you're looking at now is a 2D site plan which depicts the final two phases of the development that we are applying for and going through the approval process on right now with the city. On the upper left side of your screen, you'll see the senior living building that is approximately 81 units right now, and along with the phase 3 building that is on the upper right-hand side of your screen, which is currently projected to have 192 units. These sites will complete out the existing development or the redevelopment of the area that is to the north of the North Star Station. Along with some concerns of this site, as along with every other site, most people are very interested in seeing what the parking that will be provided, as well as what has been provided in the past in comparable projects. Here we have a direct comparison that we can draw from the neighbors that we also own just to the south. So as you can see on this project, for the most part, the phase 3 and phase 4 have a slightly greater parking ratio than what was developed in phase 1 or phase 2. These parking counts will, shift around slightly as we go through the city entitlement process to make sure that we're here adhering to all standards that are related to whether it's screening within parking lots or otherwise. But generally speaking, we feel quite comfortable with this. We found with most of our projects that anywhere from a 1.0 to a 1.35 has been sufficient in the past in terms of operating within our portfolio. And here we are presenting exactly that on the higher end of that range at 1.35 and 1.56. Access to the site, as can be seen on this point, will be provided through the current existing curb cut that exists off of Northdale Boulevard. So there will be no new intersections that will be created on this, and most of the existing drive lanes to access the two sites to the north are currently in place today. Here are some perspective renderings of what the building would look like. What you're looking at here in the upper left would be the main access point to the building. The area that is just to the left of the door that you're seeing now is going to be the screened in pool area, and we'll cover some of the other amenities once we get to the amenity slides, but I wanted to provide some context as to what the building would look like. If you remember, this is mirroring and is evolutionary, but still consistent with the design that is being used on the existing projects with a significant amount of brick, as well as other accented elements on the upper floors and articulation to make sure that the building doesn't look too monotonous. The target market that we are targeting for this particular development will be households whose income ranges approximately between $50,000 and $125,000 a year. In the existing project to the south, the mean income for that project is the average household is probably in the $80,000 to $85,000 range. The demographics in terms of the single versus multiple occupants is that we have about a third of the apartments are occupied by single individuals, and about 2/3 are of household sizes 2 persons or larger. About 10% to 15% of those households have children, which is what was fairly consistent with what we would expect for this next phase of the development. And as is typical with most developments these days, the development demographics for age exists on a bell curve, or rather a bipolar distribution, where the majority of the residents exist in that, younger millennial, the younger millennial group, with about 80 to 85% of the residents being in their, mid to late 20s to mid to late 30s. And then there's a second group of people who are downsizing out of their larger homes, which represent about 15 to 20% of their population. The typical lease up for a project of this type means that we will draw approximately 30 to 35% of our future resident base from the existing community, and then about 2/3 of the resident base will come from outside of this community. The community that we are planning for phase 3, these are all pictures from phase 1, it will have substantially similar amenities, meaning that we will have community and game rooms as well as resident storage. There will be covered bike and vehicle parking. There will be pet grooming areas, as well as likely a sports simulator, a large outdoor swimming pool, a makerspace area, and other bike fix-it stations, and potentially other amenities as we continue to refine the programming. The units will be premium in nature. Each unit will feature solid surface countertops, as well as stainless steel or black stainless steel appliances. We intend to have a washer and dryer in every unit, consistent with Lyra down to the south. There will be balconies on selected units, as well as a fair number of other interior features that are premium for this market. What you are now looking at are the senior affordable renderings of this building, being consistent with the brick, along with a number of the accented materials and the design themes that follow the previous 3 phases of the project. This is a project that will be constructed later. And has a number of other unique amenities, such as outdoor and exterior sport courts that'll have walking paths around the site, and other amenities that are to be defined yet, that we are still working with programming along with our marketing department and other housing partners. Grant can talk about this a little bit more, but what's up on the screen right now is a brief timeline that will go through the rough process through which we will go through the approvals of the city. We have submitted now here in May of 2021 for a development stage land use application, and those commission hearings will likely happen here in the coming summer months. And if we hit approvals at each one of those, then we would estimate that we would have a groundbreaking likely late this fall, with the construction about a year to a year and a half, which would mean a delivery in the building in late spring to early summer in 2023. And now we can, or I can take some additional questions, whether they be from Matt, Grant, or audience members.
All right. Well, thank you, Trevor. Nice presentation. Do we have any questions? I don't see any questions in the chat. So we have a total of 9 attendees. So if you would like to ask a question, with this particular format, you'll have to use the chat feature. So if you want to type your question at the bottom, you can then ask it, and we will attempt to address it. So I'll give people a minute or two. If it looks like we have a question here. All right. So Trevor, can you see that question?
Yes, I think.
Yeah, I believe that's referring to the future commercial lot that's I think an acre or so right at the entrance, the traffic signal there.
Yeah, so we are working and we are constantly entertaining like offers and trying to put out leasing opportunities both on LoopNet and a variety of other sites to do a build-to-suit commercial building on that portion consistent with the plans that we have shown before. I think that everyone can acknowledge how difficult COVID has been on retail leasing and other properties, which has put some dampening on those redevelopment efforts. But we are fully engaged, and the site is posted in a variety of places, and are hoping to move forward as soon as retail starts to open back up.
That was a good question. Trevor, can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned earlier the occupancy or the leasing, 88% at Lyra, which I believe is the market rate building, 100% at Nova. Talk a little bit about maybe in the context, how that compares to some other developments. And of course, the other thing that was going on last year still is the impact of the pandemic. Talk about this development and how it's done to others relative to other developments, and especially in light of the pandemic.
Absolutely. That's a great question. So typically, if it were a typical lease up or a typical, non-pandemic sort of leasing season or operation, what you would look at or expect for a building is that you would have around, 25 to up to 40 units that are pre-leased at the beginning on the day one that building opens. And then buildings will typically lease somewhere between 10 to 15 units a month thereafter. We've actually been exceptionally lucky because although a number of other properties that we and other developers have gone through lease up with has slowed down significantly during the COVID pandemic, Lyra has leased up incredibly well. So being at 88% after being only 1 year into its lease up period, as well as the fact that it did all this despite the pandemic happening, we are very proud and confident of the leasing and availability in the market to absorb a second phase within this development. Here now, with it being leased at 88%, we are thinking that the final will probably reach a stabilized occupancy, which is between 93 and 95% here in the next, probably a couple of months or so. We have the leasing season is just starting now, and it typically ramps up generally from the mid to April and through probably early September, I would say, is where the prime leasing season is for this particular type of property.
Okay. Great. Matt, I think we have another question.
Yeah, we have another question. I think we can just address it verbally. Asking, are there plans for an additional stoplight on Northdale to alleviate some of the congestions? I know we're still kind of at preliminary stages here, and Sherman is undertaking a traffic study, has done some traffic analysis to really understand what amount of traffic will be generated by these additional phases. At the moment, there aren't any plans. It's something certainly we're continuing to look at. The access to Northdale from this new phase will be largely the same as for the first two buildings. So there won't be any additional pressure put on the 123rd and Northdale intersection. But again, we're still taking a look at all the traffic needs and figuring out what might be, what if anything might need to be done to address those. I don't know, Grant or Trevor, if you have anything to add.
I don't know if I have anything to add to that conversation, but if you want me to keep talking a little bit about leasing trends that we learned from Lyra in phase one while we wait for another question, I'm happy to do that as well.
Looks like we have another question. The phase for seniors, will there be some open, the phase for seniors, will there be some open concept floor plans? When can we check them out? So the senior phase, and maybe we didn't talk about this, but we should talk a little bit about the phasing, Trevor, correct? You're going to start with phase 3, which is the market rate building. The phase 4, which is the question about the senior building, that will come at a later date. We don't have do you have a specific time frame about when that you might start that?
Yeah, so we are working today to start, doing some preliminary concept entitlement level drawings, and are starting to go full board the design phase probably later this year. The funding for that one will likely be tied to calendar year 2022, which means that we'll be going back in front of the city probably in early 2022 or late 2021 for some of those application cycles. We would likely expect to break ground probably in the late spring of 2022, and the building would probably finish about 16 months thereafter. In terms of design for open concept floor plans, we do plan to have a number of concepts that are going to have open concepts within their apartment units. We found that both seniors as well as any younger residents typically have seemed to prefer them. That has certainly been the trend. We don't have any floor plans that we can share today because we haven't progressed to finalize any of those individual unit plans. In fact, we're actually finishing up on where exactly the demising walls are going to be in the market rate phase, but we are working towards those answers.
Great. We also have a follow-up question about there are many seniors 65 and over who are waiting for this. Any chance of it opening sooner? And you talked a little bit, Trevor, about the timing, and this will be an affordable senior project. And without getting too far into the weeds, can you sort of explain what that is and why that process typically takes a little longer?
Yeah, absolutely. So it being affordable project means that it's going to have a certain level of subsidy that comes from a variety of different sources. Those sources are on specific timelines, and some of those sources can only fund a certain number of projects each year. Unfortunately, the resources that are available for the 2020 or 2021 projects have already been committed, which means that we won't be able to start and break ground on it this year, but there are still resources available for next year, which we intend to pursue.
Okay. All right. Yeah, another question about seniors. Is the senior one only affordable? Is the market rate one a senior one?
Currently, the market rate project that is proposed in phase 3 is not going to be senior specific. We certainly do not age discriminate at any of our properties, and we have a number of residents that are 55 or 65 and older that do actually live in Lyra today. Many of them enjoy the activity that comes with living in an apartment community and don't feel the need to go into age restricted housing. But right now, the only plan for a senior phase in the project is the 81 unit phase 4 that would start next year.
Great. All right. Thank you for that. Thank you for that question. Those are all very good questions. Anyone else have questions that come to mind? One thing that I was thinking about, and I don't know how, Trevor, how familiar you are with sort of the day-to-day operations there. I know it's not the same as being the on-site manager, but can you talk generally about how the pandemic affected just the way that the building was managed, what kinds of restrictions there were? And the other question that comes to mind is, how did it work having more people maybe than normal working from home in terms of parking, those kinds
Yeah.
of things? Did you ever run into any issues?
Yeah, so we have actually been more engaged and communicative with our residents during COVID from a touch point basis than I think that we ever have before, particularly because we're not getting as many face-to-face interactions for obvious reasons. So throughout the pandemic, Sherman overhauled the entirety of its operations. It switched to doing a ton of virtual leasing. You can now tour every single one of our buildings virtually, either from on site, or you can do it a live guided tour with a person at the property, or you can do a self-guided tour at some properties that we have. And so that has really changed the game in terms of leasing and interactions. From a day-to-day operations perspective, at the beginning of the pandemic, almost all of the community spaces were shut down, and we had to work fast to find a way to implement safety precautions to make sure that the residents, while living in the building, would be able to use its amenities, but to do so safely. And so we expanded our safety protocols to do more cleanings of apartments. We provide sanitation sites throughout. We made all of the amenities time limited so that you had to have a reservation in order to use them. And then, consistent with governor's orders, created occupancy restrictions on the spaces that we had. We also facilitated more outdoor events and a number of virtual events that ended up becoming quite popular, whether that was virtual bingo or otherwise. In terms of having more people working from home or otherwise, I don't necessarily know if we saw an uptick in the total number of vehicles. Certainly the vehicles were in their parking spots longer. And so we, would suspend rules that would prevent you from parking, for 5 days in a row or something of that nature. But I don't know if we necessarily saw a lot of people going out and acquiring new cars at the properties, or having new residents get additional vehicles as the demand to drive into the office went down.
All right, thank you. Matt, how are we doing on next question? Looks like we've got two.
Yeah, it looks like, yes, similar question. The amenities for this phase. Maybe Trevor, you could just kind of recap the amenities for both these buildings, and would some of those be shared between the two buildings? Would they be primarily separate for tenants of one or the other?
Most of the amenities will be specific to the buildings that you're in. That is true mostly for the interior amenities. A lot of the exterior amenities are going to be, will be shared across a number of the phases. If there is a park on the site, you'll be able to use it if you are a member of a number of the properties that are in the vicinity here. In terms of interior amenities, we intend for there to be a sports simulator room. In Lyra, the golf simulator is really popular. Unsure if we're going to do another golf simulator, or if we'll do a more generic one that would have, something like bowling simulations or other things of that nature. We found in Colorado that people really like to have ski simulators, so maybe we would investigate that here. There's also going to have, your typical other, market rate level amenities. So there will be a fitness studio, there will be a yoga room. Each of those will have raised ceiling heights, along with a club and community room. There will be a place for, that we like to call makerspace, for people that want to create, greenhouses, or build their IKEA furniture in a space that's larger than their apartment, or if they want to work on, doing specific types of art, or something that might otherwise be louder, or create more mess than it would in someone's apartment. And so that's one of the things that we have also seen a lot more during COVID, is that we are expanding the ability for residents to get outside of their units to do either their day-to-day activities or to work. One thing that we are planning that wasn't included in Lyra is we're going to have a significantly larger number of work from home areas within the building. So we'll have what we're calling Zoom rooms, where people can go to take private calls, have professional backgrounds, do job interviews, and things of that nature that are more for one-on-one remote working, as opposed to co-working spaces that were sort of all the rage pre-pandemic.
One thing that I wanted to go back to a question that was raised about traffic, well, whether there will be an additional light installed. And I think, Matt, you addressed that we're still evaluating that. I don't know if we did mention that, Trevor, you have engaged a traffic engineer. I think it was probably the same firm that worked on phase one. That
Yes,
analysis, I think, has been done. I know you talked last week that you looked at it at least briefly. We have not yet seen it. So, but that will be part of the conversation. Is we'll look at what those impacts are and make sure that whatever the traffic impacts are, that that they're properly addressed. So that will be part of the analysis that we do with the formal land use application when it comes in.
absolutely. We have no problem with any of that information being public record. It will be the same provider that did the previous phases, and it will be open information that I'm sure that we will get additional questions from at City Council, as well as the Planning Commission hearings that are upcoming.
One of the other topics that is certainly on the minds of city staff is what is the future of the North Star commuter rail line. We know that I don't know if it's operating right now. If it is, it has very limited service. I think the hope is that as demand for that service picks up, presumably as more businesses that are downtown start to open back up and have employees return to the office, that demand will pick up. Does that, just in general, does that raise some concerns from your end as a developer as far as the viability of that particular system?
While we think the North Star is an incredible asset, I just want to start out with that. I mean, I am maybe a little biased because back in 2013, I worked for Metro Transit, and I actually rode from the Coon Rapids North Star Station down to the Haywood office building every day. And it's a really, really great, asset. Every single person that I have talked to in Coon Rapids or otherwise that rides it for Twins games or on their regular commutes just loves it. And I have a hard time thinking that ridership won't come back, but I agree that it is mildly concerning, the conversations out there around the North Star being there. We think and we design our apartment communities to be quite resilient. We don't think that these all of a sudden become unfeasible if the North Star goes away, but it is certainly a huge added plus to the residents that live there.
Yeah. Great. Good answer. Matt, do you have any questions that come to mind that we didn't address?
No, I think we've covered a lot of ground. I don't have any other questions, and I don't see anything else in the chat box that we haven't addressed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll give it a minute or two. If there are any other questions that people want to ask, please feel free to do so. I'll talk a little bit about the next steps in the process. Trevor did touch on this in his presentation. So they have submitted a site plan and a plat for review. That will go before the Planning Commission. The plan right now is that will be reviewed on June 17th. The site plan, I believe, triggers a public hearing, so we will send out a formal notice again to the residents that would be within the immediate area that would typically be notified as part of a land use application. So there will be an opportunity if someone couldn't attend tonight, or if you have attended and you'd like to show up in person, you can certainly do that. Again, that'll be on June 17th. And we'll have more details as we start to put that agenda together. I believe that will also be a hybrid meeting. So if people are not comfortable showing up in person, we'll use this same platform, Zoom, if people want to ask questions in a virtual setting, if they're more comfortable doing that. So again, that's June 17th. The plat will also be reviewed that evening. With a site plan approval, normally the final stop is the Planning Commission, but the plat is a subdivision of land, and so that will go before the City Council at a following meeting, probably the first meeting in July would be my guess. So there will be an opportunity on June 17th for the public to weigh in officially and provide comments or ask questions if they would like to do that. So we'll, I guess we don't have any other questions, so we'll leave it there for this evening. Trevor, I want to thank you for your time. Very much appreciate sharing your presentation this evening. We look forward to the development. The first 2 phases of the development, I think, exceeded the city's expectations. We're very pleased with the way that project has turned out. I think our partnership with Sherman has been a very good one, and we're looking forward to the next phase of the development. With that, I think we'll conclude our presentation this evening. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Have a good night.